Hello, and welcome to another presentation in our series of Supremus Group's Patient Awareness Briefs. Each one of these 15-minute sessions addresses a topic of direct importance to you as a consumer of healthcare services. And it explains an aspect of the regulations as they deal with how you should be informed and engaged in the healthcare delivery process. The one we're going to visit now is about consent and authorization under the HIPAA law and what these should mean to you. We hope that you will find this valuable information useful in helping you make the very best decisions regarding how you will manage your participation in this process. So let's get started. Slide 2. The topics we're going to cover in this session are your health information and what it is, what it's made up of, what consent means, for there's more than one type of consent, what authorization means and its relationship to consent, and the control over your health information that you have. Slide 3. Your health information, that is, the information that's used to provide care for you, is collected, used, and disclosed by the doctors, dentists, and other professionals who provide that care to you. This information is vital for your providers to keep track of your medical history and the claims filed for it. The law requires that they exercise caution in handling it and using it, and it places requirements on them to protect your information and conditions on how it will be used or shared. In this session of our series, we will discuss this information and what consent and authorization mean regarding the use of your health information. Slide 4. As you can see by this diagram, there are several different types of this information by which you are identified and known as a patient or as a member of a health plan. First, there's health information, and this is what you might call the universe of all the information that could be included in here, whether it can be traced to a specific individual or not. Then we have individually identifiable health information. This is all of the information that can be associated with a specific individual. Within that, we have certain pieces called collectively protected health information. And then the electronic transactions that are provided from your healthcare giver to your health plan so that the services and care that's given to you can be paid for. So we have the terms protected health information, individually identifiable health information, PHI, which describes the electronic version of PHI, and then we have patient identifiable information. Now, all of these different types draw from the same collection of data elements, but they're grouped in such a way as to combine elements used for different purposes. Slide 5. As you can see from this slide, there are several different identifiers and data elements that are included in this mass of information we call individually identifiable health information. There are 18 specific elements, and if you'll take a moment to read the description of each one, you'll see that these are common indicators of various aspects of your life. Each one, in its own way, provides some pointer towards you as an individual. Your name, where you live, your phone number, fax number, your email address, your social security number, of course, various forms of identifying numbers like medical record number, health plan member number, your license plates, all these different things. And all of these, in one combination or another, are used to identify you specifically as an individual. And so these various types of information bundled together called identifiable health information identify you individually. And this is the information that is supposed to be used, collected, and disclosed by your providers in the course of providing care to you. So how does all this relate to this thing we call consent? Well, in healthcare, we now have two types of consent. The first type is the one you're probably most familiar with, called informed consent. This type of consent means that a physician or other provider, such as a dentist, has to tell you everything there is in the way of potential benefit, risk, or any potential alternatives that are involved with any procedure or any other course of treatment. And after having explained this to you, to get your written consent before proceeding. This type of consent, the informed consent, is the kind that he must have before he can proceed with whatever he plans to do. Without this, he's not able to administer any treatment, medicine, or procedure. And of course, he needs your consent in writing. The other kind of consent we call a HIPAA consent. The HIPAA consent is when a physician or other provider asks you to grant them written permission to collect, use, and disclose, as minimally necessary, your health information. It means now that they have your permission to formulate a request from other providers that you may have seen to obtain records of your medical history and get a clear idea of your state of health, anything that might currently be going on with you. Now, without this HIPAA consent, your provider can go ahead and treat you, so long as he has the other informed consent. But he starts learning about you with the very first appointment. Without this HIPAA consent, he's not able to obtain any other information about you. But he can treat you, and having your past history will make things easier for him. Slide 7. HIPAA consent provides the basis for your provider to go obtain copies of your health record from anyone else that you've seen. It also means that your health plan can request a HIPAA consent and get information about your claims history related to any treatments or medicines that you've taken in the past, so that they can set your plan premiums to be more reflective of your actual needs and of your actual history. Now, one point that you need to know is that the law states that you cannot be denied care or enrollment in a health plan if you do not provide the HIPAA consent or the HIPAA authorization, which we'll talk about next. However, it is also true that your provider will be far better informed of what care you may need, what medicines, what procedures, and so on, things that are already in progress, and your health plan will be better able to judge the types of premiums that you should pay if they're allowed to obtain this information about your past history. Slide 8. Now, the HIPAA authorization often accompanies the HIPAA consent, and it places conditions within limits on the collection, use, and disclosure of this information. Now, this is at the national level, for HIPAA is a federal law. Many states have passed additional conditions, additional requirements that are now included with what HIPAA has stated at the federal level. And when states do this, by adding conditions to a federal law, they make it stricter by asking for more things to be done, longer time limits, additional paperwork, and so on. So if you are in a state that has this kind of thing, your provider should know about it. If you're not sure, be sure to ask. Typically, this HIPAA consent and this HIPAA authorization are renewed on an annual basis, and the law permits you to revoke them at any time. Slide 9. Now, when you provide an authorization, certain kinds of conditions and criteria need to be observed. The first is, this authorization must always be provided in writing. It must be, in all of its respects, as specific as possible. It needs to define very clearly and precisely what information about you can be released. It needs to specifically identify the individual or the entity that is disclosing this PHI, protected health information. It needs to specifically identify the individuals or entities who will be receiving this information. And it needs to be signed by you or someone you formally designate. That designation, by the way, should be in writing, and this is what HIPAA calls your designated personal representative. Now again, this needs to be as detailed as possible. It needs to be as precise and as specific as you can make it. Now, to make things convenient, your provider's office typically has a form that will enable you to do this without too much trouble. Slide 10. Now, authorizations tend to be time or event driven. By time driven, we mean that it expires on a certain date, or that it lasts for a certain specified period of time. If it's event driven, that means that something like a surgery or other condition, some event in your healthcare that has a finite period of time or a definite beginning and a definite end, is what defines the event. And as soon as that event comes and goes, then the authorization associated with it expires. Now, as I said, any authorization you provide can be revoked by you or by your designated personal representative if they sign it on your behalf at any time. And the law requires that you be informed by your provider of your right to do this. It also requires that you be given the opportunity to modify the authorization at any time. Change what is allowed to be released, what can be collected, used, and disclosed, whom it can be collected, used, and disclosed by, or to whom it can be collected, used, and disclosed. Now bear in mind that when you make changes to these authorizations and these consent forms, they only affect things that happen from that point forward. If you revoke any authorization, what has already been distributed, what has already been disclosed by your provider, that's going to stay disclosed. It only affects things that start from the point that you make the modification or revoke the authorization. Slide 11. Now, the law makes it very clear that you being treated cannot be made contingent upon signing an authorization unless that treatment is associated with some form of research study. Now, there are research studies that are done. People join them every day. Part of joining that research study is the signing of a HIPAA consent and a HIPAA authorization. Now, the law regards a person joining a research study as an entirely voluntary thing that they may decide to do. Because it is voluntary, the conditions that a research organization, having you come on board as someone who's participating in that research study, the law allows them to require you to give them these documents in order for you to participate in the study for that very reason, that it's a totally voluntary action that you're taking. And if you don't provide these, they can exclude you. Now, that doesn't happen under normal healthcare provision circumstances. Only in these research cases is that going to happen. But it is something you need to be aware of, because there may come a time when a research study is done in your area that may be of interest, or it may be of importance to you and to a condition that you may be suffering at some time. So you do need to be aware of this. Enrollment in a health plan cannot be contingent on signing an authorization unless, as some people do, you're getting an individual health insurance policy. If it is, then this authorization is going to assist your insurance company in making an assessment and setting premiums. This kind of policy is the kind where you are the only person covered on it. And in order for the insurance company to set premiums that are reflective of your needs and that are fair to both parties, they will require these. And the law allows them to make this requirement of you. Slide 12. Now, as of the passage of the Omnibus Rule in 2013, certain what are called required statements have been added. One of them is, as I was saying before, you have the right to revoke the authorization or make any modifications to it at any time after you issue it. Your provider's Notice of Privacy Practices needs to inform you of this. It means that they do not have the ability to condition treatment payment, enrollment in a health plan, or eligibility for benefits on the authorization. And it means that there's the potential, and this is an important point for you to be aware of, there is the potential for this information to be disclosed under the authorization, and this information could be subject to redisclosure by the recipient of that information. Now, this is a statement that is intended to make you aware that in the normal course of collection, use, and disclosure of your health information for purposes of treating you or getting your treatments paid for, that your provider will very likely have to redisclose this information to other parties, notably the health plan, possibly others, such as billers and coders who take the information and put it into a specific form to be filed with your health plan. That when this information is collected, used, and disclosed, it will go legitimately to other parties. But your provider is making you aware of this so that you know that while they may be doing everything that they can do that's appropriate to protect your information, that they have no way of guaranteeing that anyone else who receives this information from them, as is proper in the normal course of business, they cannot guarantee that this other party will protect that information in the same way, and that they cannot be held responsible for what that other party does or does not do. That makes your being aware of these conditions all the more important, to know who has your information, that the reason they have it is a legitimate reason. But it's also not reasonable for you to hold people responsible when they can't control the actions or inactions of others. So what is best is for you to be informed of these various rules so that you can take the kind of action that you need to protect your own information. Slide 13. Now, the authorizations can be perfect and they can be effective, or they can be imperfect and thus defective. An authorization is considered to be defective and unenforceable if any of the conditions that I'm going to say apply. First off, the authorization is not specific enough. The authorization itself has not been filled out completely with respect to any of the core elements. The authorization violates this prohibition of conditioning treatment or upon your enrollment in a health plan being required to have an authorization. Or if there is any material information, that is any of the content of the authorization you're providing, if that information is known to be false. Any of these conditions, any one of them, can create a defective authorization that cannot be enforced. And so, as the provider of this authorization, you need to be sure that everything in it is complete, accurate, and current. Slide 14. So, as we conclude our session today, as the patient, you need to be aware of some following points. You are of central importance to the management of your health care and participating in the process. As the patient, you do have a great deal of control over your information and how it's going to be used. Your providers depend on you to help them learn everything that they can about you so that your care is as timely and appropriate as it can be to meet your health needs. And they need you to help them get the information necessary to ensure that as soon as they can. But you need to be an active team member, and that means that you need to learn what they need to do with that information and hold them accountable for doing it, using it properly, and always protecting it from misuse. Slide 15. So, what is your course of action? Well, as the patient, you need to first get informed and get involved. Doctors want you to be a participant and a partner with them in ensuring that your care is the very best and most appropriate that it can be. This information that we've talked about today is about you, and you need to know what they're collecting, using, and how they're using it, who they're disclosing it to. And as they tell you about medical advice or anything else along those lines, be sure to ask your provider if you have questions. Thank you for joining us. We hope that this information will prove to be very valuable for you in helping you make the very best decisions regarding how you will manage your participation in this process and how you will control your information. Thank you, and come back and see us.